The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all. All right, we are back on the long road to ruin. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And it is Pride Month. Yes, June 2023, LGBTQI plus Pride Month. And we're back with a trio of podcasts celebrating the length and breadth of queer cinema. And boy, are we kicking things off with controversial John Waters' The Trash Trilogy. 2 out of 3 featuring drag queen, and I do mean queen of drags, Divine. Of course, helping me celebrate a month of queer cinema and this look at the Trash Trilogy from John Waters is my good friend, the original here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, my buddy, man who helped me kind of kick things off here on the long road to ruin. Sean Comer is back from exile. Yes, we sent nuclear waves into space, and he came out of the LP, and now he is back to make us kneel before him.
First of all, fuck you for damn near making me tear up with that montage of the classic Long Road to Ruin title cards. Making my heart swell 3 sizes and go up about 2 degrees in temperature. It's so warm in here. But no! Hi, everybody. Never fear, my fellow misfit queers. Your scruffy, awkward internet pride dad is here. Yeah, once a year for about 30 days or so, I get to crawl out of my moon dumpster alongside Goldar. Goldar and I go off and have a little gyros and ice cream date. We commit sexual acts that are not legal in all 50 states. And then, while he's asleep, I bugger off to come talk about Pride Cinema with one of my bestest friends in the world, Mark. So thank you again for having me. That dumpster was getting fucking cramped. My feet are still asleep.
Last year we did, it was the first year we did this, where we were like going to dedicate an entire month to queer cinema. And just like I do with Black History Month, I look at it all. I look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. I don't just pick the freshest fruit from the finest tree, the most freshest tree. I want to look at the stuff that doesn't make the community look great. I want to look at the films that aren't great, but I want to look at also the films that celebrate the community and the films that are superior, ones that are entered in the National Register of Film, if you will. And so last year, for those that are interested, Sean and I looked at, we did a triple feature for Stonewall, because when you want subtlety in your look at gay rights, you call Roland Emmerich. Not everyone's going to laugh at that joke because they don't know what I mean by that, but the people that got it just snorted liquid out of their nose. We looked at Stonewall, Basic Instinct, and But I'm a Cheerleader, which features one of the actresses we're going to be talking about in these three movies, Mink Stole. Then we did a Damn You Hollywood, if I remember correctly, for 2 streaming movies. One was Fire Island, that was on Hulu, and the other one, I don't know how it ended up on the list of gay movies, but it did. Master on Amazon Prime, and we really had a lot of good things to say about Fire Island. If you haven't seen it yet, go get on your Hulu and go check it out after you're done with us. And then I think we ended the month with, that's the wrong one. We ended the, there you are. We ended the month with Brokeback Mountain, Benedetta, and My Own Private Idaho. See, I look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. This year, in addition to the Trash Trilogy, we are also looking at Boys Don't Cry, Ed Wood, and Gia. You can figure out for yourself which one of the criteria that met. And we end things with Far From Heaven, The Kids Are All Right, and Mulholland Drive. And that is your 2023 queer lineup. So let's talk about John Waters in this here Trash Trilogy. Trash Trilogy consists of Pink Flamingos, Female Trouble, and Desperate Living. And the cast is the Dreamlanders, which is the troupe of actors from the Baltimore area that he used pretty often for a lot of his movies. As I said before, 2 of which star Divine. And before I start reading Wikipedia pages, Sean, when I pitched this to you, how familiar were you with, I mean, everyone seems to know John Waters. If they know his name at all, they know Hairspray. Were you familiar with anything else from John Waters?
No, you pretty much nailed it. Hairspray was about it. When you first posted the Trash Trilogy, I had to look up what movies it included. And then I realized, oh, okay, Pink Flamingos, that's ringing a bell. I don't know what it's about. I've never seen it. But again, it's another one that,
and when you see it, it changes you as a person. Holy cow!
when you see it, you root for the plot of Flashpoint to come to life, and for Barry Allen to swoop in and say, "Oh, damn, I'm doing you a solid." No, you get a do-over on this one. I kid. But the thing is, I will preface this by saying these movies do have their place of importance among queer cinema. I will give them their due for that. That being said, they also make the point that in any art form, I don't really go for these lists of things you must read or watch or listen to before you die. No. Because not all of that is going to be enjoyable. There are going to be things that you enjoy so much that you want to go back and watch them again and again. You put them on as background noise when you're cleaning. Yeah. They are a defibrillator to your heart when you're feeling down. They're those things that you see them once, you appreciate them, you're thankful for the experience, but you will be equally thankful to never experience them again.
Let me tell you, before we get into who John Waters is and who Divine is, and then we actually get to Pink Flamingos 12 hours from now, I have to say this. This was a cult hit. We'll talk a little bit about this in a minute, but just as a general point, this was a cult hit on the midnight movie scene. This was also seen as one of those art pieces that stretches the boundaries of good taste. I mean, the joke about Pink Flamingos is it's an exercise in poor taste. It's right on the movie poster.
The best comparison that I would make, me being the horror fan that I am, would be something like Last House on the Left, or I Spit on Your Grave, or Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah, this is right. John Waters is right out of like the Roger Corman school of.
He idolized Corman.
Yeah,
Corman was a hero of his.
If anyone has been watching my podcast long enough, besides being the overly critical guy that hangs out with the Mormon and yells about movies, the other thing that I think I'm known for is I the thing I'm known for is my love of 70s cinema. Whatever subgenre that happens to fall into. Movies in the 70s were there was a time where directors were truly artists. They had a vision. They weren't just making products for a multinational company. They were creating moving art, and they were showing it to people. And there was some of it was shock for shock's sake. Some of it was they just had something they had to get off their mind, off their chest, and it was shocking in and of itself. And there was space for that in the medium. I don't know if in the year of our Lord 2023, John Waters would be as successful. The only reason why I say that is it is nothing to flip on, to grab your phone, type a few things into a Google search, and find a shocking movie. A movie that tests the boundaries of good and poor taste. And that's only really since streaming became a thing. So we're talking the last 3 or 4 years, especially since the world ended in 2020, that people have had access to the length and breadth of new and old movies that run up the down staircase, that are not corporate products. They're there. You just have to look for them. Back in the 70s, however, you didn't have as much access to these things. You had to go to your local independent theater. And if you lived in Podunk, Idaho, where your local theater was in Wyoming, you didn't have access to independent art theater where they would show a John Waters movie or something like that.
If you want a great example of that, look at the fact that this was a New Line Cinema baby. Mm-hmm. And at the time, New Line Cinema was best known for shopping around touring screenings of the original Reefer Madness.
Right.
It wasn't the house that Freddy built yet.
Right.
No Blade, no Lord of the Rings, no Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, none of that. It was a little Manhattan storefront that wasn't yet like a passing twinkle out of the corner of a plucky young Wes Craven's eye.
Right. So, I mean, we're not just examining a series of movies that looks at a marginalized group of people, the LGBTQI community. We're really looking at this because it is a place in time in film history where artists were kind of free to put gross, horrendous nonsense on screen, and people were there for it. People were there for it. Yeah, so you don't watch the Trash Trilogy because you're looking for high quality cinema. You watch the Trash Trilogy because you would like to know what it was like when people made art and they were free to kind of throw shit at the canvas to see if it stuck.
Early John Waters makes Kevin Smith look like fucking Hitchcock.
It really does. Look, I'm here for it. I want to talk about it. We're going to, but this was a labor of love and an exercise in frustration. So here we go.
It better be able to live on love because it damn sure wasn't money and technical expertise.
No, my God, the editing on this makes Batman v Superman look like fucking Scorsese. Holy cow!
Not wrong.
Some of these cuts, I was like, did he do this with a weed whacker? Why? Like
the weird cuts, the zooms, the shaky cams, all throughout the entire fucking trilogy.
Yeah, like I've seen better shot porn, and that's all I'm gonna say about some of the technical aspects of these fucking movies.
But the thing is, when you talk about John Waters, did he have something to say here? Yes, but I don't think he was forcing it. I mean, he was this. I will come right out and say it. As far as queer kids go, John Waters had the blueprint for the ideal set of parents. He grew up weird. He grew up awkward. He grew up fascinated with car crashes. He would want to go to junkyards on outings because he thought that the wrecked cars were fascinating. And his parents at one point were more than a little bit concerned, but they took him to a child psychologist who pretty much said, well, he's not hurting anybody.
Yeah.
He seems to otherwise be pretty well adjusted. There's no red flags here.
There's an argument
So,
for letting different people exist and be different, because you never know
yeah,
what wonderfulness they're going to create. That we shouldn't,
exactly.
drug and therapy the creativity out of people.
Well,
All right, so
exactly. And his parents were pretty much went along with it. They went right along and just said, "Okay, cool. If
all right,
if
so
that's what you
John
want to do."
Waters was born 1946. As we said, he's a American filmmaker, writer, actor, and artist. He rose to fame in the early 70s for his transgressive cult films. Boy, that is one way of putting it, including Multiple Maniacs from 1970's Pink Flamingos, which we'll talk about momentarily. Female Trouble, the follow-up to that. He wrote and directed the comedy film Hairspray, which became an international success and was later adapted into the hit Broadway musical and a 2007 musical film. He has written and directed other films, including Polyester, Crybaby, Serial Mom, Pecker, Cecil B. Demented. His films contain
Wait,
elements.
he made Pecker?
He sure did, Ollie. His films contain elements of postmodern comedy and surrealism. He often worked with the actor and drag queen Divine and the regular cast of the Dreamlanders. I don't need to get into his acting credits. You can look that up. But more to the point, Waters also worked with a visual artist across different media, such as installations, photography, and sculpture. In 2016, he received an honorary degree from the Maryland Institute College of Art. The audiobooks he narrated for his books, Carsick and Mr. Know-It-All, were nominated for Grammy Award for Best Spoken Word Albums in 2015 and 2020, respectively. In 2018, he was named an officer of the Order of Arts and Letters in France. Yeah, that tracks for me. All right, so that's John Waters. The other person that features heavily, she's right there on the poster for Pink Flamingos. She's, done artsy for Female Trouble, and she's not in Desperate Living, but is Divine. So who is Divine? Divine is Harris Glenn Milstead, better known by this stage name Divine, who passed away in 1988. And this was an American actor, singer, and drag queen. Closely associated with John Waters, Divine was a character actor, usually performing female roles in cinematic and theatrical productions, and adopted a female drag persona for his musical career. Divine was in, besides these two movies that we're going to talk about, was also in Roman Candles, Mondo Trasho, Lust in the Dust, Trouble Mind, was in the 1988 Hairspray, was in Out of the Dark, and then a bunch of documentaries and archive footage. And she's got two compilation albums, two albums rather, Jungle Jezebel and T-shirts and tight blue jeans. And then that's that. So that is Divine.
And arguably most famous for being the just about damn near 1-for-1 inspiration for Ursula the Sea Witch in Walt Disney's Little Mermaid,
which is out now in theaters, played by Melissa McCarthy, somewhat. Described by People magazine as the drag queen of the century, Divine has remained a cult figure, particularly within the LGBT community, and has provided the inspiration for fictional characters, artworks, and songs. Various books and documentary films devoted to his life have also been produced, including Divine, Trash, and I Am Divine. All right, so now let's get into Pink Flamingos. On a budget of $12,000, this thing made $7 million. This is a bona fide hit.
Good God.
It's like at some point, like you just can't knock the hustle. Like I'm watching Pink Flamingos, and there's like a voice in the back of my head where my sanity once laid, going, "Why are you watching this? Why are you watching this? Why are you watching this? Why are you watching this?" And then I'm sitting there, like, because sometimes I won't go into a movie knowing anything about it. I'm just gonna watch this Tabula Rosa. I want that visceral reaction to the art piece that I'm digesting, so that I can think about it and go, okay, well, how did this affect me? And I don't have any prejudice going into it, going, well, it's fucking recognized by the National Congress, as an art piece. Like, I should probably like this more. Like, no, I want to be honest to myself and to our listeners how I reacted to this thing. Then I go back and look at it and go, oh my God, this thing mattered. Like, so, but yeah.
And with good reason.
Movie.
Right? Yeah. And with good reason. We are going to take our shots at the craft and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But now, as we'll get into, there is a reason this is so important.
Yeah. So Pink Flamingos is a 1972 American black comedy film, as we said, written, produced, narrated, filmed, and edited terribly by John Waters. It's part of the Trash Trilogy, like we've been talking about, along with Female Trouble and Desperate Living. Stars Divine, also Edith Massey, Mink Stoll. I love that name, by the way. She's now my new favorite person. David Lockery, Marion Vivian Pierce, Danny Mills, and they were known as the Dreamlanders, which was a group of actors, as I said before, from the Baltimore area. Displaying the this is fantastic. Displaying the tagline, "An exercise in poor taste." That is the understatement of the year. Pink Flamingos is notorious for outrageousness, nudity, profanity, in pursuit of frivolity, scatology, and sensationology, and skewed epistemology. This sounds
that
like
that is a sentence someone had to write.
Yeah,
after seeing Pink Flamingos.
That's some Alice in Wonderland smoking caterpillar shit right there. It features a number of increasingly revolting scenes. In case you wanted to watch this with your children, that's centered on
no.
Yeah, wait till you have if you live with 7 people like I do, make sure they're all out of the house. This centered on exhibitionism.
They were all out of the house, weren't they?
Yeah. Voyeurism, okay. Sodomy, soda you, soda everybody in the world. Masturbation, as we all do. Gluttony, vomiting, rape, incest, murder. What's your movie about? Vomiting and rape. Cannibalism, castration, foot fetishism, because why not? Because we haven't hit all the isms. And concludes to the accompaniment of How Much Is That Doggy in the Window, with Divine's consumption of dog feces, quote, the real thing. Because you wouldn't want working dog feces. You gotta shoot dog feces, really, to sell your movie. Narrator Walters assures us the film is considered a preliminary exponent of abject art. If you don't know what abject art is, it's a concept in critical theory referring to becoming cast off and separated from norms and rules, especially on the scale of society and morality. Yeah, this is what Pink Flamingos is what the world's going to look like when we're done with Maslow's pyramid of need and social contracting. Oi. The film, and this is the best. This is my favorite part about this whole Wikipedia entry. The film, at first semi-clandestine, has received a warm reception from film critics. Again, I'd like to remind people this was the 70s. And despite being banned in several countries, became a cult film in subsequent decades. In 2021, the film was selected for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being, quote, culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. There's a scene where a guy fucks a woman and between them is a chicken. Okay? So I would like to go on record as saying, in the year of our Lord 2023, I am recognizing that Pink Flamingos is culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant with a guy fucking a woman with a chicken between them. I'm just saying, Sean Comer of the Screaming Boy podcast, there was a chicken involved in a fucking in this movie.
Wait, your witness, sir. Am I about to join the Screaming Boy crew too?
I assign that to everyone.
I better free my schedule up.
That's a running gag. Anyway,
okay, gotcha.
I'm not going to go into a plot synopsis because I don't want my brain to try to dig out of my skull and run away. Suffice it to say, Divine and a group of ne'er-do-wells live in a trailer, and there's another couple that they are insulted by the fact that Divine has been described as the filthiest person in the world. So they want Divine dead.
Because that is an official title in this world. That might as well be the WBC Heavyweight Championship in this movie.
Yeah, that is the Queen of England in this movie. Queen of England, WBC Heavyweight Champion, filthiest person in the world. And they don't like
if this were queer WWE, Divine would be Roman fucking Reigns.
That is one way to put it. Yes. So the whole movie is them trying to take Divine down in this black comedy, and stuff happens. Sean, stuff happens.
Does it ever? You don't say, Mark.
All right, let's talk about this movie for a few minutes before before I have to get up and wander into the woods to live deliberately. Can we talk about
is it Thursday already for you?
I don't want to talk about Divine. Divine's fine in this.
Wow.
Can we just talk about how Edith Massey is in a crib and her entire length and breadth of her dialogue is, when am I getting eggs? And that leads me to the first discussion point about all three of these movies, but specifically Pink Flamingos. John Waters did not let a moment of film breathe in these things where there wasn't someone talking. And it was almost like, yeah, this was like, I want to see the screenplay for this and like frame it on my wall because it's got to be art in and of itself. This is the longest series of run-on sentences I've ever seen in a movie captured on film since the birth of the talkies. This was insane.
Yeah. For a little bit of context, we have to point out that Waters obviously did eventually develop some polish as a filmmaker.
Sorry.
It did happen. He was still a young man at this point. But this is one of the most goddamn punk rock queer movies you are liable to see from any era.
Yeah,
this made
TLC punk look like the Shawshank Redemption by comparison. This is rough.
Well, and I'm going to defy you're not going to talk about Divine Edict for just a moment because number one, we can't talk about this trilogy without talking to her.
Oh no, we have to talk about Divine. I just want to start there.
You can't appreciate her presence in these movies without appreciating that she was built differently for drag queens at the time. Drag queens at the time very much looked down their noses at Divine because they were really obsessed and fixated on this very prim, elegant, put together, immaculate, kind of bougie femininity. Whereas Divine was the kind of drag queen that would have been right the fuck at home on Christopher Street just a few years earlier. And that bears noting too, is this came out just a few years after the Stonewall riots, a few years into what we now know today as Pride. And Waters once described his friend, one-time lover, and consummate muse as someone that he wanted to elevate to being like the Godzilla of drag queens, this confrontational mold breaker who could transcend drag into something else entirely. He said that he wanted Divine to be the drag queen that all the other drag queens ran screaming from. Gotta think mission accomplished.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, release the banner. You did it. She is the Yokozuna of drag queens.
Yeah. But that's important because that's a big reason why to so many both aspiring and veteran drag queens across generations, why she's been such a transcendent icon is because she's kind of become this ultimate avatar of, well, you not only reject me, but you pretty much want to prey on me for my identity. You want to make who I am illegal. So all sins being equal, I might as well just go all the fuck out at this point.
Right.
I'm not going to change your mind.
There's a reason why when we do queer and Black History Month movies, I also look at the bad stuff because there's this tendency, especially now, especially in like the Twitterverse, to show a minority but only the good parts, as if like there's no such thing as a bad Black person, there's no such thing as a bad gay person, and so like we can never look. So everything always has to be, instead of the length and breadth of the human experience, everybody has to be an Oscar statue, and as you know, they have to be perfect. They have to be angels. And I was like, that's it. Yeah. I'm more willing to believe there's just as bad and good gay people as there is straight people than I am to believe all gay people are perfect.
You're absolutely right. And it goes both ways. We have had it both ways, and neither one is exactly perfect. And I think that's kind of why I admire the honesty of the Trash Trilogy.
Yeah.
Is the fact that, number one, gay people, when we're reduced to the most horrible stock stereotypes that and cliches that Hollywood has foisted upon us, we've become either fetish or monster. Very little in between.
Well, I'll tell you, when you compare gay cinema to black cinema, the thing that always comes up is, how do you present these minority communities so that they're palatable for the average white person to spend money on? Well, usually as jokes or monsters. Is the answer.
Or we're a caricature, a queericature, perhaps a queericature.
Sure, put it on a t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing those two have in common is the fact that when it comes to portraying queer culture and black culture authentically, those were two avenues that Hollywood at the time, mainstream Hollywood, wasn't going to touch with a 10-foot fucking pole.
Right.
But that was the beauty of the prevalence of the Wild West indie cinema, was the fact that you could do anything. You could make what you want, and it could be seen. And as it was seen, your people got seen.
I want to compare this. I want a quick touch on something that you're. So right now, The Little Mermaid's in theaters. The Little Mermaid has a black lead. There were audience members, like large swaths of black families at my showing, that were like applauding her being there. Like, you can hear my full review of the show. It's up now. We did it on Tuesday. But the reason why I'm saying that is, I said on that show, and it relates to what we're talking about here, representation matters. But it matters in every facet. We know when people who have it rough, who have struggled, see their struggle portrayed on screen, it makes them, one of the things about movies that's important is it makes us all feel less alone. When you can see your story, when you can see someone that looks like you struggling the way you do, it makes you feel like, okay, I'm not as bad off as I thought I was. Somebody out there knows my struggle, and they put it out there for the world to see. That's the joy of looking at this kind of cinema.
Well, and to really drive that home, let's also acknowledge the opposite of what happens as well. And yeah, you know what? I'm going to get a little bit heated. Some of you have wanted angry Sean back for a while. Well, guess what? Sean is angry about something that actually matters this time, instead of just being pissed about the arc of the Paranormal Activity movies or Hellraiser sequels. So yeah, if I sound like I'm being a little bit confrontational, or I'm addressing certain people directly, I mean, if you think I'm addressing you directly, maybe think about what that means for your views. So when some of you fuckers decide to make a big deal out of a character's gender, sexuality, race, religion, any of it being recast for a latter reimagining of something, and I don't want to stipulate this so I don't get the bullshit. Oh, well, then I guess Matt Damon can be Black Panther. No, fuck you, for the reasons I'm about to stipulate. As long as it's not central to who that character is, what the fuck are you really missing out on? But I will tell you what you are doing every time you look at a major, iconic, fictional character who happens to be cast with a worthy Black or Asian or queer or trans performer. A group that has had to fight for worthy recognition in Hollywood, who sometimes has had to fight to not have roles of their race, gender, what have you, yanked out from under them by other races, genders, sexualities, etc. When you tell people you can't be Ariel because you're Black, you are also telling every impressionable child who is tuned into this conversation, who might overhear it, who might come across something stray on the internet, guess what? There's a ceiling on who you can be, what you can do, what we will accept as your role, either on screen or in society. And if you would do that and have no second thought about it, just because a mermaid happens to have a little more melanin in her skin, fuck you. Unrepentantly, fuck you up, down, and sideways. You are not entitled to a valid opinion of anything ever again, at least not one that I'm going to fucking listen to, because you actually think that's a thing. And that's one of the things that I love about this movie, is the fact that divine is unapologetically divine. This is not John Waters necessarily hammering home a point in some heavy-handed way that we've criticized other directors and writers for. This is just John making the kinds of movies that he would want to see. And so, yes, a lot of who he is as an openly gay man, as a misfit, as a bit of a punk rock outcast, of course it's going to bleed through. Because if you're making something that you would want to see, it's going to be something that is going to reflect you. It's going to reflect your people. And that's why I like the fact that one of the whole underlying themes of this movie is Divine and her little found family. Mm-hmm. Yes, they may be filthy, but they're an honest kind of filthy. They're upfront about it. There's no malice.
It's
There's
funny
no
because
animus.
I brought up the thing about Edith Massey and the eggs thing. So she's like this mentally ill. They refer to her as mom. She may or may not be their actual mother. Who knows? But she's she's sitting in the crib and she's like obsessing over eggs or whatever. And the thing about like Divine and the other character, I can't remember the actress's name. They actually genuinely care about this woman. Like weirdly enough, like they set up like the wedding for her. They make sure she gets the eggs. She's like. It's a weird statement about the family, about family in this movie, in this really weirdo, over like sexualized, horrific picture. There are some genuine statements about loving each other and caring for each other and getting through the hard times. It's hard to see it. I saw it and I'm talking about it because we set up this hour and a half to discuss these things. But I think when you're sitting there at midnight, just quoting the dialogue from the movie, it might not occur to you that he is making a statement about family, which I thought was interesting. We seem to have lost Sean for a moment. I think he's back. Hopefully he's back. There he is.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi is being kind of ridiculous right now. I'll get it sorted out by the next show.
Okay. I was just saying, it might not be as resonant with people as you're watching this at a midnight screening for the fifth time, reciting all the dialogue. But when, in the quiet moments, when you really examine all three of these movies, John Waters had some very pointed things to say about family, about mental illness, about any number of subjects. It's so funny because the lessons we learn and the things we talk about thematically sometimes end up in the weirdest movies. Movies where
they do,
where guys like fucking a woman with a chicken between them also talks about the importance of taking care of each other. It's like the end of a Jerry Springer episode. We've had people.
That's kind of what I was getting at. Though, is the fact that they are chaotic, filthy. Yeah. There is no animus. There's no ill will towards anyone. They might hurt people, but it's not because they dislike them or because they're trying to hold them down necessarily just for their own benefit. And that's the contrast between them and the couple who insist that they're the filthy. They're filthy in a different way. They're more of a metaphorical filthy. They're more filthy in character with the stains of corruption and the filth of deceit.
Well, what I love about them is that is if Robert Winfrey were here, he would be talking about how they are the classic villain archetype. They are jealous. Yeah. They are not as good as the hero, and they feel like the only way that they can be as good as the hero is if they tear the hero down. That's out of every great movie we've ever seen.
Here's a weird thing that came to mind. And for those of you who are just watching the podcast for the first time, first off, hi, I'm sorry.
That's our motto. Welcome to the Radulich Broadcasting Network. We're sorry.
We are so sorry. So a weird thing that came to mind. I think it's because it's actually one of my favorite books. The other couple reminds me a bit of something that Malcolm X kind of frequently said in terms of comparing sort of combating Republicans of the time versus working with Democrats to advance the Nation of Islam's civil rights agenda. And that's the fact that he preferred the Republicans because they were honest about it. They were upfront. There was no bullshit. There was no agenda. It's just, we fucking hate you. Noted. At least I know where I stand. Not Malcolm's exact words.
Mm-hmm.
But for some weird fucking reason, that was the first thing that came to mind when I thought about that. That and Eddie Guerrero always saying, yeah, we lie, we cheat, we steal, but at least we're honest about it.
A couple of quick notes about scenes from the movie, because we should probably talk about the movie specifically before we move on to the next one.
Yeah.
I thought the Edith, as annoying as the run-on sentence, there was not a single period written in this thing. It's all commas. As annoying as that got, it had almost a lyrical quality to it. Like Pink Flamingos, Female Trouble, and Desperate Living, I want to see almost redone as musicals, as operas. It has that intonation and quality to the dialogue to it. There's so much repetition. Like, it's almost, in terms of structure, Shakespearean in quality. There was like almost like a lyrical structure to how they talk to each other and how things were repeated, and certain lines that kept popping up over and over again, like the use of the word filthy as many times as it is. Like we used to talk about the drinking game. If you take a drink every time someone says filthy in Pink Flamingos, you will die. You will turn into mostly vodka. So there's that. I think the idea of there's almost a morality play going on in Pink Flamingos where you get the sense that the villains are only in it because Divine is this terrible human being and she must be stopped, but it's not so much that. It's we want to be more, we want to be worse than she is, and we don't know how. How do you get to the levels of depravity that this family got to, almost knee-jerk like, almost intrinsically? Like their filthiness was a way of life, and there was no questioning of it. There was no trying. This is who we are as people. We get up in the morning and we're terrible. And
what was that fucking Bane speech from The Dark Knight Rises about darkness?
Yeah, I was born in the darkness, Batman.
I was born in the filth.
Yes. And they're having to try, and it's like, well, what else? And it's like the kid who eats worms. It's like, what else do I have to do to get respect around here? And then there's the person next to you who just does it really naturally, and there's no thought about it. The other side
now
to
you're
that,
touching on the themes of female trouble.
Yeah. Well, hang on, we'll get there. Were there any? There's so much. I keep doing the chicken thing because that's where I had to push myself to finish the movie, because I almost noped the fuck out. I almost texted you like, I can't do this. Captain fucking Filth himself, Mr. Hypersexual, Mr. forcing Robert to watch The Idol because it's my birthday present to me, almost didn't get through Pink Flamingos. But I'm like, no, I'm not doing that to Sean. I'm not getting him started on this and then bailing out on him. So I finished. But there was a couple of scenes in here that were a little much for me. Off the top of your head, before we move on to female troubles, is there we have this time, people are watching, they're like, okay, is there anything I should be aware of in Pink Flamingos before I decide I'm going to watch this thing?
I keep coming back to Divine serving dinner guests meat that has been stuffed in her crotch.
Oh yeah, when she shoplifts the meat and she shoves it right up the old hoo-ha, got you all in check, and then later on she's outside hobo grilling it. I mean, I think a lot of that comes. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that I'm an enthusiastic home cook,
if y'all have ever seen my Instagram, you know this. That was horrifying. I now want to go hug the entire meat section at Walmart and just say, it's okay, babies. It's just a movie.
I feel like this scene needed. I feel like if this scene gets made 10 years later, if the movie gets made 10 years later, but by Mel Brooks, there's a scene of somebody going, "Does this baby taste like vagina to you?" No. No. Why? And if it's the Wayans brothers, they're spitting out hair. And that is the evolution of comedy, folks. It gets dumber and more obvious as the years went on, and people less creative than John Waters take it over. All right. Anything else about Pink Flamingos? Otherwise, I'm moving on to Female Trouble.
I think we've said all that needs to be said. On to the Female Troubles.
All right. So Female Troubles is an interesting movie. 1974 independent dark comedy film, co-composed, photographed, co-edited and written, produced, and directed by John Waters, starring Divine, Dave Lockery, Mary Vivian Pierce, Mink Stoll, Edith Massey, Michael Potter, Cookie Mueller, and Susan Walsh. The film is about a delinquent high school student who runs away from home, gets pregnant while hitchhiking, and becomes entangled in a criminal scheme to prove crime equals beauty. The film is dedicated to the Manson family member, Charles Tex Watson. Waters' prison visit to Watson inspired the Crime is Beauty theme of the film. In the film's opening credits, Waters includes a wooden toy helicopter that Watson made for him. It had a budget of $25,000. It has a 90% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. The consensus summarizes director John Waters' affection for camp brings texture to society, and that's about it. I don't know how much money this fucking thing made, nor do I know if it has any other rewards to it. It is what it is. So the whole thing is, I think Female Trouble of all three of these is probably the one that resonates with modern times the best, because it's the Kardashian thing of becoming a celebrity due to your notoriety, not because you have any talent or bring anything that's worthwhile to the cultural conversation. You're oddly,
the Kardashians are not the comparison that I would make.
Okay, who would you more compare this to?
I would say things like Joe Exotic, Here Comes Honey Boo Boo.
Mm-hmm.
Anything like that.
Paris Hilton, who's famous just for being famous. Her dad owns hotels.
No. You see, but again, I think that misses the point a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, those are carefully engineered, calculating machinations of the pretty much securely wealthy and, at least on a superficial level, problem-free. I will say on a superficial level, because yes, as more and more of the celebrities of that era are kind of speaking their truth about that time, we're finding out that things were a little more complicated at times than what they seemed. But anyway, no, I kind of turn to Joe Exotic and Honey Boo Boo and shows of that because they're shows that take the damaged, the impoverished, the people who have been just kind of damaged and twisted and broken by their circumstances, and reduces them to sideshows, and the people that are kind of being exploited are willing to go along with it because they've kind of been sold the bill of goods that this is the way up. Right. These aren't the stairs. This is the elevator. Climb on in. There's room. And so that kind of just sets them up as elevator go up to just continuing to endure just kind of one ugly bump after another, as long as the ride keeps going and as long as they're putting distance between themselves and those previous tragic circumstances, whatever they might be. That's kind of why I hold them a little bit apart from your comparisons with all.
Yeah, I would go along with that. I wouldn't fight you too hard. The other thing I would say is, especially if you spent time on TikTok in the last year or so, the amount of TikToks that talk about narcissistic behavior, there are psychological paper upon psychological paper being put out there for public consumption through websites like Psychology Today and whatnot that are dealing with like a rise in narcissism in Western culture and psychology. And so there's a lot of TikTok dedicated to, well, what is narcissism and how do you recognize it? How do you deal with these people? Because it's kind of no getting away from it now. And when I listen to the dialogue from, I can't remember what her name of her character is, Dawn Davenport.
Yeah.
When I hear her talk, it's amazing that this was in 1974 because Female Trouble is the only of these three movies that you could make now and you wouldn't miss a beat. And it would actually be more relevant now, given the tenor of the national conversation and culture. When she talks about things like, I'm not sending you to school. I don't have time to deal with you being at school and having to make sure you're doing your homework and all this other stuff. And then later on, when they're like, we want to film you committing crimes, we think you're fantastic. And as you pointed out, she's leaning into that, and to the point where she ends up being executed at the end. It's like, well, it's all worth it as long as I get famous. Like stuff like that. I was like, wow, this is the only one of these movies that actually has a point that's relevant now. That isn't just like, well, harken back to the days of yore where things were different, and we were really pushing the boundaries of acceptance and cult taste.
Folks, you gotta remember to an entire class of people, to an entire great strata of people, pretty much worldwide. If I can't be famous, I'll be infamous is basically the equivalent to, sorry, we don't have Pepsi. Is Coke okay?
Yeah. So Female Trouble takes us from when she's a teenager. And again, I'm not going to do a plot synopsis, but there are certain scenes in here that really drive home the point that I was just trying to make. So, for example, we see her as a high school student, and she gets kicked out of class for fighting with a girl who insulted her. But, she insults her, and she can't accept it at all. And so instead, she just beats the shit out of this girl in the middle of the classroom. We move on to Christmas, and she's been talking about getting a certain kind of shoe, cha-chas, I believe.
Cha-cha heels!
Yeah. She's like, if I don't get cha-cha heels, I'm going to ruin Christmas. Kind of like how I did when I was running around scissoring the children in my house. Thank you. Thank you, Max Caster, for that. Yes. So she doesn't get cha-cha heels. She gets the wrong shoe. And instead of showing grace and dignity and appreciation, she fucking starts beating on her family and knocking over the Christmas tree. And there is, because I do love film and the craft of film, there is a close-up shot of the mom going, not on Christmas. Why? Why on Christmas?
Hello? Someone get me out of here.
And then she runs away from home, and she ends up having sex with a guy in an alley, and she gets pregnant by said guy.
Which is it's one of the moments when I think John could absolutely be accused of going maybe a little bit too far.
No, that's the next movie with the children playing doctor.
There's that too. There's that too, but this was, and I'm not even talking about it. It's a weird dissonant blend of, it's a rape scene, but it's a rape scene that is so comically ineptly shot. I refuse to believe it wasn't purposely shot this badly. That you kind of come away from it, unlike in something like I Spit on Your Grave or Last House on the Left, where you definitely know how you feel about what you just watched committed to celluloid. You walk away from this kind of going, I am so confused about myself right now.
Yeah, it's not quite nude nuns with big guns, but it's a disturbing scene. So she has this baby, and she refuses to basically the baby just sort of lives with her as a roommate, like, not really raising this child at all, not sent to school. There's a scene later on where like essentially like producers come to see her about like putting her on TV, and she like makes dinner for them. She was like, if they don't finish their meal, you can have their scraps. And so the kid's like, well, if they don't get to eat, nobody does. It's like fucking throws spaghetti everywhere. It's like there's theater in the absurd, and then there's what the fuck ever John Waters was doing with this movie. And then we continue to, she marries like a beautician at one point, and this is yet another series of run-on sentences, of hyperbolic dialogue, of repetition. But you trace her life through the raising and the death of this child, her fame, her infamy, her eventual imprisonment, and then her death. Like I said, it's probably the most thematically resonant. It's also probably the most coherent. Like, Pink Flamingos is someone's fucking kaleidoscope-driven acid dream, and Desperate Living is what inspired somebody to do Rent. It's like I like this idea of homeless people. What if we made it competent and palatable for average people and put good music in there? But Female Trouble actually had something to say. It's just a weird movie. What did you think of Female Trouble?
It's the movie that drunkenly stumbles so that better movies can walk and run.
Yeah.
But at the same time, yes, it's absurdist, but and yes, your average kid who gets thrown out of the house for, well, it is June, much more traumatizing reasons than not getting those cha-cha heels. They do kind of go through some shit just so they can have the comfort of knowing where their next meal is coming from.
Yeah.
And not all of them make it. Not all of them end up in the electric chair, but not everyone finds that solid ground. And I like to think that on a certain level, that was John acknowledging that, but with a spoonful of heroin that makes the medicine go down.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I keep coming back to this is some punk rock shit.
Yeah.
Because this is the experience of listening to a lot of classic punk. You're going to miss out on so much of what's said that still rings shockingly true today if all you're doing is sitting there listening for some fucking Steve Vai or Kirk Hammett guitar solo that's never gonna fucking come. This is not Scorsese. This is not James Cameron.
Can we also talk about how John Waters only craft dramatic direction for any one of his actors is scream your dialogue? Like there's never there is never a quiet moment in any of these three movies. Everyone is constantly screaming. Like, I have friends.
It has all the attention to the craft of acting of your average middle school fall play.
This is you keep saying punk rock, and I don't disagree with you in terms of tone and theme, but in terms of performance, this is death metal. This is one tone, one intonation the entire way through.
I'd give you that.
6 hours of this. Like, there is what do you call it? Interrogation. The cool name they give torture.
Enhanced interrogation.
Yeah, there's enhanced interrogation where they'll play Metallica at loudly for an Arab. I would suggest make them sit through these movies, because by the end of it, they'll tell you where the weapons of mass destruction are. There's no there's no fucking way. 6 hours. I watched two of these back to back, and again I sat there wondering about my life choices. And I watched Desperate Living this morning before we started recording. And let me tell you, this is not the way to watch these movies. These need to be watched a year apart from each other. You need time to digest this. This was 6 hours of shitty people screaming at you in rhythmic dialogue. Like, I if I didn't know what we were doing and someone just said you should do this, I would think I was being punked. Like, it was that bad.
It's fucking, it's performance art.
Yeah.
I almost don't even want to call it.
This is some shit that inspired Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, you know what might be the best comparison of the entire episode. It is just that, right? Is just that right there. You know, comics revere Andy for being so far ahead of his time. But okay, you talked about the drinking game. Get ready. I'm about to make a professional wrestling reference. I kind of brought this up on my Facebook the other day. I talked about professional wrestlers that, as an ardent fan, you were enamored, fascinated by what they're doing well, and what they do better than so many of their peers, all but a few of their peers. But if you were to sit down and watch them with someone, you aren't completely confident you could convey what makes them so great and have them see it as clearly as you do. Like, I threw out Larry Zbyszko and Bruno Sammartino, even Jake Roberts and Arn Anderson. Guys for whom, if you really know what you're watching, it's brilliant. It's it's virtuosity. But at the same time, if you're sitting next to somebody who knows, okay, I'm watching professional wrestling, when is somebody going to get whacked with a chair? Or when is somebody going to do a 720 off a low orbit satellite to put somebody through a table and into a pool of bloodthirsty sharks? They're not going to get it. That's kind of what it is with watching this, even if you're framing it as being an important part of queer cinema. If somebody's experience is something that's as put together and accomplished as Brokeback Mountain, My Own Private Idaho, To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, just to throw a few out there. Hell, the fucking Birdcage, the original or the remake. And you sit them down and watch this and say, hey, these are landmarks in queer cinema. You got to check this out. They're going to walk away with about the same prevailing opinion as you and I have. Is, are you sure we can't turn back time?
Yeah. All right.
Share, I pray to thee.
All right, so like I said, the scenes that stood out to me were the spaghetti scene, just because it was so stupid. There's her ruining Christmas cracked me up. The speech at the end as she's going into the electric chair. I mean, there's monologues, and then there's what she says in that goddamn chair as she's about to be shocked. That's what stood out to me in Female Trouble. What stood out to you before we move on to Desperate Living?
You pretty much nailed everything.
Okay.
You pretty much nailed it. It is be gay, do crime, taken to the ultimate. Taken just as far as you can possibly take it. And again, I just watch this and I imagine like Jello Biafra watching this and just going, that's the stuff.
Yeah.
Or fucking Susie Sue, someone like that.
Yeah, if you're, I want to go back to something I said at the top of the podcast about so much of what we digest now is corporate slop. And look, I'm here for it. I do a fucking podcast on corporate slop every Tuesday against Robert Winfrey's will. There I am, just eating my gruel.
Excuse me. There's an Overwatch lifer who wants to sink a little bit deeper into his chair right now.
Yeah. There's this occasion where I'm like, I gotta see. It's like, you have a steady diet. You have the steady Western diet of well-prepared, well-made, well-taken care of food. But sometimes you just need to eat something weird. So, like this may or may not be good. That's not the point. It's just, I got to do something different here. I got to remind myself I'm still alive and can still feel things and step out of, subtle knife out of my normal existence. That's kind of what Pink Flamingo, Female Trouble, and Desperate Living they did for me. It was like, oh yeah, I remember what it's like to be horrified by what I'm watching. I remember what it's like to watch something and go, ugh, I can't believe someone spent money on this. And that's okay. I can appreciate someone's shitty movie that they were like, no, this is my baby. I was given $200 million by Disney to remake, a classic fucking cartoon. And then it's like, well, it didn't turn out very good. And I'm going to yell at those people because how are you given this much responsibility and did this poor a job? I could never criticize John Water for these things. This came from his weirdo mind. No. His weirdo mind. Like, I don't know if he watches these things like Kevin Smith watched some of his early stuff and go, oof, this is not aged well. I could have done this better. But whatever his opinion is.
That's what I want to drive home. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I want to just briefly drive home is please do not take any of this and think that we don't respect John Waters as a filmmaker.
No.
Nothing could be further from the truth. It's just that he had something that he wanted to say, a vision he wanted to present, and he refused to let lack of resources or training hold him back from that to kind of wait for the perfect moment when he would have like a Warner Brothers or a Universal or an MGM or whatever budget.
Right. So because
he wanted to just get it out there while he could.
Right. So because I'm social, I have a lot of people I talk to and some fairly new people as of late. And I'm just kind of like, well, what are you doing today? I'm doing, it's Pride Month and we're kicking things off with 3 John Waters movies. Who the fuck is John Waters? All right. John Waters is responsible for Hairspray. Well, what movies are you looking at? And I got to tell them about these things. Like, well, what are they about? And I'm like,
how do you begin?
Yeah, I don't know. Smash your dick in a door while drinking absinthe. And then when you open your eyes, look into a kaleidoscope. What you see is what these movies are about. That's about the most accurate way of describing them. Anything else about Female Trouble? If not, we'll move on.
When you stare too long into divine, divine stares right back.
All right, Desperate Living, which has the coolest fucking title card entry of any one of these movies. This was pretty cool. Desperate Living is a 1977 American comedy film directed, produced, written by John Waters. This one does not star Divine. It stars Liz Renee, Mink Stoll, Edith Massey, Susan Lowe, Mary Vivian Pierce, and Jean Hill. It is the third installment of the Trash Trilogy. It generated a cult following around Renee, who appeared in at least 24 other films. So let's talk about her for a second. Liz Renee was an actress from, she was born in 1926 and died in 2007. She was in some of this stuff you may have heard of. She's in Blackenstein from 1973. She's in Lady Street Fighter in 81, Dimension in Fear 98. Her last movie was Mark of the Astro Zombies in 2004.
Lady Street Fighter is the only one I've passionately heard of.
Yeah. So here at Desperate Living, she is the title. She is Muffy Saint Jacques. Fantastic. I don't even remember which character this was, but doesn't matter. Ming Stoll, I think, is like the star of this thing. She plays Peggy Gravel. Not the world's greatest look at mental health, by the way. So the whole thing here is that when we meet neurotic, delusional suburban housewife Peggy Gravel, she's having a time of it in her upper middle class home. She ends up, her and the maid, the nurse, whoever she fucking was in this house, Griselda, end up killing her husband and then having to take refuge in a shanty town ruled by the evil Queen Carlotta, played by Edith Massey, and her treasonous daughter, Princess Cuckoo. Okay, this fucking movie. So as a meditation on people having to, as you talked about, having to escape their lives through, unfortunate circumstances, and then having to live on the wrong side of the tracks in the underground, and what that does to people, and how it kind of creates like Morlocks out of, what were probably people who needed help. It's an interesting movie, but it's kind of like someone taking like a really important subject, let's say abortion or gun control, and saying the way we're going to tackle this is through performance art. You might have something worthwhile to say about a very important subject, but no one's fucking getting it. No one could possibly look at Desperate Living and get what John Waters is saying about people who are forced out of society and having to live in an unprotected place with people who are not great people to begin with and take advantage of them. It's a weird movie, and it focuses a little too much on the stuff that John Waters seems to like. So, for example, Edith as the queen and her army of Judas Priest lookalikes, it focuses on her being gross and dumb, and it's less about this mentally ill woman having to live in squalor because she murdered her husband because she wasn't getting the help that she needed. This is a movie that I had to fast forward through a lot because by the time I had gotten through Pink Flamingos and Female Trouble, I'm like, I'm enough with fucking John Waters already. Like, I get it. I get what you're doing with these movies. I don't need 20 minutes of dialogue saying the same shit over and over again. Yeah.
Doses.
Yeah, I was, not that I didn't like Desperate Living, I was just kind of done with this for a while by the time I got done with Female Trouble. Real quick, I want to see if there was a brief controversy arose when lesbian groups attacked the film for its depiction of lesbianism, because of course they did, and for taking the title of a defunct pro-lesbian magazine. New Line Cinema blew the film up from 16 to 35 millimeter and opened it at midnight in Manhattan. The original poster featured a cooked rat on the plate, was rejected by the New York Times to run, forcing a new poster to be created 3 days before the opening. The new poster featured Liz Renee in his screaming pose, fashioned from a production still. It's pretty cool, actually. And the last, critics from Good Housekeeping walked out of the film after 10 minutes. Yeah, I don't blame them. I enjoyed the film.
Had the perfect part.
David Shute of the Boston Phoenix said the film, in Desperate Living, Waters comes close to creating a work of true trash art. On Rotten Tomatoes, it holds a 70% based on reviews from 10. Here's the thing. Taken on its own, I actually think it's a worthwhile film. Probably of the Female Trouble is the most resonant for modern times and themes. The best made of these might be Desperate Living in terms of its coherency. My problem is my problem with it is, again, it took some fairly one, this is the third time we've seen all the John Waters tricks. By this point, it's like, all right, buddy, this is what I mean by this is death metal. This is now the third death metal song in a row that sounds just like the other two. Play a different note, do a different thing, try something else, or I'm going home. That's kind of my take on Desperate Living. Because even like the sex and nudity in this isn't neither sexy nor horrific the way Female Trouble and Pink Flamingos are. This was almost felt like someone doing a John Waters impression. Like, doesn't he put a lot of gross sex shit in his movies? Yeah. All right, well, we're going to do gross sex shit here too. The two women approximating lesbian sex as essentially gyrating next to one another and yelling, "Get it?" sounds more like a parody than it does someone creating trash art. What do you think?
Well, number one, I agree with the parody of John Waters part, kind of the same way I look at Zach and Miri Make a Porno as being like Kevin Smith self-parodying every Kevin Smith movie ever made, whether intentionally or otherwise. But so, Queers Conquer Fascism, the movie.
Yeah.
To be honest, I actually think that the whole central premise and semblance of a story probably, as you kind of alluded to, you came close to it, kind of hews closest to everything that came to a boiling point with the Stonewall riots.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's perhaps a little bit of more than a little bit of an allegorical thread there.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly different after 2 full movies watching a John Waters joint without Divine.
Mm-hmm.
That was certainly a little bit weird. I didn't love the trans theme of, you know, wants to swap gender just to please, because they think it'll please their partner, and ends up regretting it. Oh, that bothers me, because that's an imaginary common occurrence that a whole lot of transphobes will grab onto with both hands and refuse to let go.
I could see that.
When the truth is, it happens so infrequently that it's barely worth acknowledging.
Yeah, I would say it's like 0.000 ad infinitum that you have the person who's transitioning for any other reason than something that's internal.
Yeah, or the modern equivalent would be the gripping fairy tale that us parents of trans kids are just taking our minors to the doctor and just telling them, you will have your pee-pee lopped off and like it. It's not happening. It doesn't happen. Newsflash, you empty-headed dumb fucks. About the most extreme thing that happens is they go on puberty blockers, which, guess what? That's reversible. Like your old Navy fleece, Karen. Reversible, meaning you can go back the other way. But it's funny. It's funny we're calling this the Trash Trilogy, because it does kind of follow the arc of first movie shows promise, has its issues. Second movie evolves, irons a lot of them out, ends up kind of being the strongest of the bunch. Third one is Matrix Revolutions.
That's really funny, actually.
Queer Neo has come forward to conquer the machines and restore true freedom to the town. This is easily the most skippable. I agree that it devolves into self-parody.
Dude, by the end of it, what the fuck's her name? Mink Stole is wearing what looks to be someone's bad Maleficent cosplay. Like, a little on the nose, John. A little on the nose. And I think she actually has a line about... See, because here's the thing. Pink Flamingos and Female Trouble dealt with a lot of the subject matter. This is going to sound like the most asshole thing I've ever said on a podcast. Bear with me. In a subtle way. Like, he said things without saying it outright. Granted, it's a lot. It's a missed chicken fucking and screaming and eating dog shit. But believe it or not, the messaging is subtle. In Desperate Living, she actually... So, I don't know if you ever watched Too Old to Die Young. But there's a bit where the cops are putting on a play in the police station for Miles Teller. And they're yelling things up, and they're yelling things like fake news and something about like fascism or whatever. And we were laughing about it because we were like a little on the nose, reffing, a little on the nose. And, you know, it's cops yelling about the virtues of fascism. But they're literally yelling out something fascism. I don't remember what the line is. Yeah, it's that dumb. And like, it's done for parody's sake, but the art of the parody is subtlety, not screaming that you're not a 5-year-old screaming a joke in someone's face. And Desperate Living, with the commentary on fascism, you literally have a character screaming it in your face like a 5-year-old. Like this was like almost as if like John Waters looks back at Pink Flamingos and Female Trouble, saw the audience reaction to them and went, apparently I have to dumb down what I'm doing here because people aren't getting it. And that's how Desperate Living really feels to me. It's just like, this was you dumbing down your own stuff because you think your audience won't get it. And maybe that's true, but I'm sorry you had to sacrifice your subtle and intelligent artistic vision for the dullards throwing toilet paper at the screen.
Unfortunate, but equally unfortunate is how often that becomes kind of a necessity.
You know, it's the people yelling, I'm Rick James bitch at David Chappelle. The length and breadth of that man's career and the things he was saying about culture, and all anyone got from it was I'm Rick James bitch.
And you know what? Dave Chappelle is no longer someone you will hear me defend pretty much ever.
Okay.
But I will say this. I think one of the most impressive things he ever did as a performer was the night when he had enough. Somebody yelled, like, do Rick James or do Little John or something at a gig. And Dave had completely had it. Dave just completely shut the show down. And he flat out told the audience why. I think he even said something to, I go to network executives and I tell them that these people are smarter than you think they think they are. You don't give them enough credit. Maybe I was fucking wrong.
That's the point. He is wrong. Individually, I think you and I before the show we did our welcoming Sean back into the cult from his expulsion. He had to go through the Radulich jumping in gang cult process of scheduling with me as I opened up my tomb and ghosts and shit rose out of it.
Now hold up a minute, player. I have never made scheduling difficult with you.
No.
With the exception of the fact that I have little concept of time someday.
No. That's not a commentary on you as it is my need to schedule people. Let's put it this way. My wife, in her complaints about marriage and monogamy, went, I don't want to be scheduled by you. A week ago, sat 5 feet from me with her other partner as they tried to coordinate schedules and looked back at me and said, you motherfucker, you broke me. Okay. the image of the Radulich cult is not a bull's head, but a Google Calendar. Multicolored.
Oh, you're not wrong about that. You're not wrong about that. But I have always made that easy on you. Just about any time.
No, that is not a complaint about you or your difficulty. It is the fact that everyone has to go through this with me. Like everyone just wants to live their life, and I'm like, I need to get you on my schedule. And it's literally like, it's like when I say I have to get you on my schedule, it almost sounds like Schillinger dipping his fingers into the oil going, you know what I've always wondered is if my dick was as big as Arabesi's. You know the horror's coming. Anywho, we were talking, all that to say we were talking about Men in Black. And and it reminded me of the Tommy Lee Jones line of individuals are smart, groups of people are way dumb. And I'm massacring that line, but that's the point he was making. And I think individually you can sit down with a person and get them through Desperate and get them through Female Trouble and get them through Pink Flamingos and go, what did we take from these movies that had some truly horrific imagery, but were saying something? And you can have that conversation and you can get from that person some real pearls of wisdom and intellectualism. If I were to sit down with a group of neurodivergent, poly fucking whatever people that I know and made them sit through these three movies, by the end of it, they would beat me to death with soap in a sock. Like, why did you make us do this? That is my point. And so I think with like Desperate Living, it was, I can't sit people down individually and have a conversation about about Desperate Living. I have to show it to mass groups of people in order for this thing to make any kind of money, which means I have to take the chance people aren't going to get this, and I'm going to be answering questions like, but for why? So instead, I'll make it dumber than I want to and sacrifice my artistic vision and intellectualism in order to appease the masses, which has got to be the worst feeling in the world when your thing then doesn't hit. Like, you make a movie, you dumb it down, you broaden it for wider appeal than the sliver you originally intended, and it still doesn't work. Like you God, the next thing you do is gotta be like fucking nude nuns with even bigger guns. Like it has to be. Like, you as an artist, or you go the opposite direction. You're like, well, maybe I'll just make the fucking Beauty and the Beast remake. Then I'll completely sell out and just do exactly what the people want, because there's no getting through to anyone.
Well, now you're making me think of Tim Burton. Actually,
you mean cinema's greatest monster?
Hear me out. I agree, but hear me out. I mean, he starts off with Beetlejuice. That's really his first big hit, the one that puts him on the map. And you can tell that it's very much his vision, balls to bones.
Yeah. And because God hates we were getting a sequel. But go on.
Yeah, fair. He goes on to make Batman, where he somehow takes one of the most coveted, sought after, commercially viable, mainstream, ripe for the plucking properties, and still manages to make it his own. And it's good. I have my issues with it as a comic fan, but it's still really fucking good.
Yes.
And Edward Scissorhands, same thing. But as time goes on, he progressively starts to become less and less of an outsider and more so of a, damn, Disney, that money titty looking good.
Yep.
And I ain't eating in a minute.
Your final thoughts here on Desperate Living, and then we're going to close this out.
Easily the most skippable. I love the queers versus fascism storyline, as ridiculous as it is. But yeah, it's very much John Waters at this stage going through the motions. And thankfully, he did finally start to kind of make some semi-mainstream breakthroughs where he got an actual budget, and we got movies like Hairspray and
Polyester.
Pecker and so on. Yeah, Polyester and so on and
if
so
you're looking
forth.
for something John Waters has done this century, check out A Dirty Shame.
Yes. Where he actually got some money and some talented people to work with. And he was also kind of maturing in terms of craft, really kind of starting to figure things out. But it's the Bill and Ted line that I frequently come back to. They do get better. I kind of, it's always been kind of my opinion that if you want that kind of John Waters surrealism, absurdism, but kind of with a whole lot more thought and meticulous detail, David Lynch is probably what you're looking
David
for.
Lynch and David Fincher.
I completely forgot about David Fincher. Yeah, David Fincher, also a great one.
Yeah, if you're looking, look, if you want John Waters, but I don't want to say competent because that's mean, and that's not really what I mean. But if you want like something that approximates palatable film, you David Fincher or what was the other one? You said it was David Fincher.
You said David Fincher. I said David Lynch, and you added David Fincher.
David Lynch, yes.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, I would almost even go so far as to say, and this is maybe a bit of a stretch, I don't know if we necessarily get to a novel like Fight Club without really kind of daring, adventurous, raw media like this.
There's an academic paper to be written about the influence of 70s film on modern cinema, from everything from the 80s till now. That I
would gobble it up with a spoon.
If you like Kang the Conqueror, the entire decade of 70s film, it doesn't exist. We jump from 1969 to 1981, I think, and then go into 2023. Film history looks way different.
Queer cinema is definitely not as honest.
Yeah. All right, that is the first installment of our 3-part series on queer cinema here in Pride Month, LGBTQI month. As I said, I will have Sean back to do the good. We're going to start with the bad, and we're going to end with the good, like we did last year. So we're going to look at Boys Don't Cry, which is my often used metaphor for doing bad things to things. It's like, oh,
and
that
I've
got
somehow never seen it.
Oh, wait till you. Okay, so every time you've heard me say that thing got Boys Don't Cried, you'll know it when you see it, and I'm immediately going to get a text from you going, "You're kind of an asshole, Radulich." So get ready for that. I said it as recently as the Little Mermaid review. I made that reference. So yes, Boys Don't Cry, Ed Wood, which I loved back when I saw it in college, and Gia, which I have never seen. And then finally, we end with the best of the best, some positive queer cinema. Far From Heaven, The Kids Are All Right, and Mulholland Drive. And that is it. As for what we did this past week, I was on Jesse's show. We reviewed the second of our trilogy of heavy metal comics. We looked at Slayer Repentless. We had a good time with that. I always love talking to Jesse. Tuesday night, I've mentioned it a couple of times now, we reviewed the new Little Mermaid live action remake. Earlier in the day, I re-aired the biggest night in Scottish boxing history from back in the day, Lee McGregor versus Cash Farouk. I did that with John War, that alternative commentary. Tomorrow, the good boys over at Movies That Don't Suck and Some That Do, they're reviewing The Mother, Tell Jennifer Lopez Not to Walk My Way, and Hypnotic. Yes, a Bennifer episode is what I've been told. They're looking at The Mother and Hypnotic. Saturday, everyone loves a bad guy, Transformers. And then, Sean, remember when I came back from one of my many exits and we did the Michael Bay trilogy at the time? Transformers. Yes. Yep. We're re-airing that this Sunday instead of a Metal Hammer of Doom. Monday will be, it's not a re-air so much as it is a creation of a page on our landing webpage for Justice League, The Tornado's Path. So if you haven't gotten a chance to hear that, there'll be a nice pretty page on our website for it. And then in the evening time, we are concluding our look at Wu-Tang, an American Saga, Season 3. Myself and Jesse are going to enter the Wu-Tang for the last time. And then on Tuesday night, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 1 on Damn You Hollywood. That'll be me and Alexis Hana and Robert Winfrey. And that is it for what I'm doing on my network. Sean, show us where you pissed from.
All right. As you can see right there below in my handle, twitch.tv/Comer Codex. I've had a few weeks off from streaming. First, I had to go to my kids' high school graduation. They were in town for that. That was a whole thing. And then after that, I had some more things with a busy schedule due to a holiday weekend. It's been a clusterfuck. But normally, I stream Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I'm still kind of nailing down times as my time management hopefully starts to improve. Mark, podcast is coming out today, right?
Yeah, this is live and it's going up. The audio will be up momentarily.
Okay, terrific. So if you are listening this in the after times, today is June 1st. I am going to be live streaming a little bit later tonight, probably from about 7 p.m. Central Time until whenever I feel like tapping out, because this is my Saturday. I would really appreciate if you would all tune in for one very big reason. Because I am insane and might kind of hate myself, and also because it is Pride Month. I normally do a thing where about once a week, I set up kind of a bet. I go into Overwatch, because I play a lot of Overwatch too, and I make a deal that for every ranked win up to 15, I will give $1 to the Trevor Project, a wonderful, wonderful LGBT organization, very close to my heart, dedicated to working to prevent suicide, particularly among younger members of our community. We took one look at taking care of queer kids and just said, fine, we'll do it ourselves until the rest of you decide to step up. But this month, I decided to do something rather insane. Since the Trevor Project is also matching donations dollar for dollar up to a certain amount, I forget what it is, through June, through Pride Month, I am aiming for 100 ranked wins for a total of a $200 donation at the end of the month to my favorite charity. And I intend to stream every single win. It's all going to be on my channel. The best way is to, number one, you can go to Twitch and either follow me, subscribe directly, or if you happen to have Amazon Prime, guess what? You get one free Prime subscription per month. Mazel tov, if you choose to use it. Or you can also follow me on Twitter, same handle, @ComerCodex, and Instagram, also the same handle, @ComerCodex, where I always put something up, usually at least about 30 minutes before I go live, and also right when I go live as well. I would appreciate the support. I would appreciate it if you would join me in giving to this worthy cause. And also, I play a shit ton of other games too. I'm basically a variety streamer who plays a whole lot of Overwatch. And through Pride Month, I'm also going to be working my way through a couple of excellent dating simulators, Dream Daddy and Monster Prom XXL. I'm going to be starting a marathon of the Life is Strange series. Putting Telltale's The Walking Dead on hold briefly so I can get through that one. And I'm kind of wearing the old Mass Effect sweatshirt for a reason. I'm really thinking about closing the month out by starting with an original Mass Effect trilogy playthrough, because queer relationships run just rife through those games. And anybody who's known me for a long time knows that's a series that is extremely near and dear to my heart. On a lot of levels, and I've wanted to stream a full playthrough for the longest time. So anyway, that's me. That's what I'm up to. And also, and I will let Mark explain this, this episode is not a one-off. This month is not a one-off. This is Edge at the 2020 Royal Rumble. I'm not back just to play the hits. I'm actually back on a regular basis to try to contribute to the product.
Yep. So I went social and sent everyone into. I became social and cut back on all my podcasting and kicked everybody out except for Robert Winfrey and Jesse.
Mm-hmm.
That's how that went. And then I was like, okay, I kind of have an idea of what my life looks like now. I kind of have an idea of when I can do this, and I decided that while there are people I want to give my time to, they also work during the day. So I have time during the day to do something that I enjoy doing, it with people that I enjoy talking to. And look, just, they are my friends too, and they deserve my time just like romantic partners do. So I was like, okay, I now have to go back and kind of fix this. So I've been working Evan, Pat, I never really kicked out, but that was kind of the first ones I brought. I was just like, as I'm throwing everybody out of the Radulich and Broadcasting Temple, I'm like, I grabbed Pat by the shorts. I'm like, come back, sit in the corner. I'll get to you. Everybody else I fucking threw out.
Sweet.
But all that to say that I started working Evan Bevins back into the schedule, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to take the opportunity this June to work Sean back into the schedule because I missed recording with Sean. So we're kind of doing a monthly, semi-monthly schedule here. Starting in July, we'll do another Long Road to Ruin, the first podcast that really got the whole thing going, back to a semi-regular basis. So we're going to be looking at Men in Black. We're doing 2 shows in September with Sean, a triple feature of Wes Anderson movies, because I really like these director examinations, and it's an opportunity when they do something new to look at the new thing plus the old thing. We're doing that with Guy Ritchie, with Ronnie Adams. I'm going to do it here with Sean. We're going to look at Asteroid City, which actually comes out June 16th. By September, God willing, it'll be somewhere streaming. And since I've never seen them, we're going to look at Rushmore and the Royal Tenenbaums. September 21st, because Sean said, hey, we should do Mortal Kombat. And I'm like, yeah, about that. So instead, we're going to do Street Fighter 2, The Legend of Chun-Li, and Mortal Kombat Annihilation. And I'm just going to go ahead and apologize now. And October, since October is all things horror and Halloweeny, he's going to come back October 5th and we're going to do another director examination. We're going to look at Get Out, Us, and Nope. Nope. Since I did not see it or review it last year.
Hey, Mark, do you mind if I propose something? Just kind of. I know this is the kind of thing we would normally do after the show or before the show, but I just had a thought when it comes to Mortal Kombat. Okay, hear me out. Annihilation. Many have gone over just what an awful abomination to the franchise that movie was. Not just the movies, but the games as well. The animated movies don't get talked about quite as much.
Okay.
And they're all available on Max. What would you think if we maybe pivoted from Annihilation over to doing one of the animated flicks?
Why don't we just do a whole show of the animated flicks? How many are there?
You know what? While you're talking, I'm actually going to fire up Max and find out.
Okay. Well, to be continued. While he does that, I'm going to close the show, but we will talk about it. All right. Tune in next week for all the stuff I said. Also, if you're new to my podcast and you got turned on because I was like, here, I did a thing for Queer Month, and I wanted to show it to you, and you're like, okay, you don't sound dumb. I'll come back and
he will turn you on. It will happen.
So I've been told. Go ahead and check out the rest of our Queer Cinema Month from last year, or the stuff that's coming up in the future. And if you just like Sean, now you know where to find him. Sean is all over my podcast and different shows that we've done in the past. Look for Sean Comer or Canvas Content. All right. With that said, since I lost the power of speech and I have to go grocery shopping, for Sean Comer, I'm Mark Radulich. Happy Queer Month, everybody. Be well, be safe, and behave.
Good.